When most people hear the word Sith, they think of black robes, red lightsabers, Palpatine, Vader, the rule of two. But here's what most casual fans don't know. The Sith were not always an order, they were not always a philosophy, and they were not always human. The Sith were a species, a people, a civilization that rose and flourished on a blood-red world at the edge of the galaxy, thousands of years before Palpatine's empire, before the Clone Wars, before the Old Republic itself had grown grey. And then they were gone. Not quickly, not cleanly. Their extinction was slow, catastrophic, and driven by forces both outside and within. It is one of the most tragic and most consequential stories in all of Star Wars lore. So today we are going all the way back to the beginning. What happened to the original Sith species? Strap in, about to go into hyperspace. The Sith species, sometimes called the Sith purebloods, were not human. They were a red-skinned humanoid people native to the planet Korriban, later known as Moraband. They had bone spurs, facial tentacles called tassels, and facial ridges that marked their bloodlines and social rank. They were physically imposing, deeply tribal, and almost entirely force-sensitive as a species. The last point is critical. Almost every member of the Sith species had some connection to the Force, not as a trained ability, but as a biological fact. The Force ran through them the way blood runs through veins. Their entire culture, their religion, their hierarchy, their art, all of it was built around their connection to what they called the dark side. They did not call it the dark side, of course. To them it was simply the Force, the way they had always known it, raw, passionate, tied to emotion and power and survival. Their society was feudal and violent. Sith Lords ruled over lesser Sith through strength and force mastery. Succession was often decided by combat, weakness was not tolerated, ambition was not just permitted, it was holy. For thousands of years, the Sith species built an empire on Korriban and the surrounding systems. The Sith Empire on Ancient Era. They raised massive tombs for their greatest lords. They carved temples into cliff sides. They created dark side artifacts and rituals of staggering complexity. Korriban's very soil became saturated with dark side energy, a wound in the Force that persists all the way to the era of Luke Skywalker. This was a civilization, not monsters, not simply villains, a people with their own history, their own grief, their own greatness. And then the Exiles arrived. Approximately 6,900 years before the Battle of Yavin, the Jedi Order fought itself. A group of Jedi Knights, gifted, powerful, and deeply convinced that the Jedi were wrong about the Force, rejected the Order's philosophy. They believed the dark side was not something to be feared and suppressed, but embraced. They called themselves the Dark Jedi, and when the Jedi Council moved against them, they fought back. They lost. The conflict known as the 100 Years' Darkness ended with the Dark Jedi defeated and exiled, cast out of Republic space and sent into the unknown. Their ships drifted until they found Korriban. What happened next would change the galaxy forever. The Dark Jedi encountered the Sith species and were stunned. Here was an entire civilization of Force users, already fluent in the dark side. They had sacrificed everything to pursue. The Sith species, for their part, looked at these strange outsiders and saw something familiar in their power and something useful in their knowledge. The Dark Jedi did not conquer the Sith species, they were absorbed into their culture, using their superior knowledge of Force techniques. The Exiles rose quickly through Sith society, earning ranks and titles. The greatest amongst them, a man named Ajunta Pell, became the Sith Emperor and the first Dark Lord of the Sith, a title that would echo down through millennia. This fusion, human Dark Jedi knowledge combined with Sith species biology and culture, created something new, something that called itself the Sith Order, something that would one day threaten to consume the galaxy. But this is also where the clock on the Sith species begins to tick down. As the Sith Order grew and the dark side empire expanded, the Sith species began to change, not through war, but through interbreeding. The human Dark Jedi and their descendants took Sith mates, Sith Lords took human concubines and wives. Across generations, the bloodlines blurred. Children were born who were part Sith species, part human, and those children still carried Force sensitivity, still carried ambition, and still rose through Sith ranks. The Sith purebloods did not disappear overnight. For thousands of years, they remained the aristocracy of the Sith Empire. Their bloodlines were prestigious, their appearances was associated with power and prestige. To have the red skin, the facial ridges, the bone spurs, that was to be of the original line. It carried weight. But weight fades, prestige dilutes, and the Sith Order, by its very nature, cared ultimately about one thing: power. Not bloodline, not biology, power. And as the millennia passed, and the Sith Empire rose and fell and rose again, the pureblood Sith became increasingly rare. Not hunted, not killed, simply outnumbered, outbred, absorbed into the larger, more diverse population of the Sith Order. There was also a war, a catastrophic, recurring war amongst the Sith. Around 5,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, the ancient Sith Empire, still bearing many purebloods in its upper ranks, made its move against the Republic. The Great Hyperspace War was a cataclysm. Sith Lord Naga Sadow led the assault, and for a time it seemed like the Republic would fall. It didn't. It persevered as always. The Republic and the Jedi pushed back. The Sith Empire was shattered. Korriban was devastated. The Sith Lords who survived fled into the unknown regions, broken and scattered. The pureblood population, which had been centered on Korriban and the core Sith worlds, took massive casualties. They would recover. The Sith always recovered. But with each collapse, left fewer purebloods behind. Each war, each purge, each generation of interbreeding reduced the original species further, and by the time of the Great Galactic War, the era of Darth Malgus and the Old Republic, which was ruled by Darth Vader, Sith purebloods were already a minority within their own empire, powerful, respected by a minority, and by the era of Darth Bane, roughly 1,000 years before the films, the Sith species as a distinct biological group had effectively ceased to exist in any meaningful number. By the time Palpatine rose to power, the Sith Order he commanded bore almost no biological connection to the original species. He was human, Vader was human, Dooku was human. The worst Sith had become entirely philosophical, a tradition, an order, a dark side religion. The name had survived, the species had not. There are a handful of Sith pureblood individuals who appear in the Star Wars, the Old Republic era, Darth Maul and Lord Calgil's lineage. These are already exceptions, already noted as rare even within their own time, which is thousands of years before the current timeline. The original Sith species were not destroyed by a single enemy, they were consumed by the very empire they built, absorbed, diluted, and ultimately erased by the ambition and expansion that were their greatest strengths. They built a legacy that shaped every Sith Lord who followed them. Their tombs still stand on Korriban. Their dark side energy still haunts the valley. Their name, Sith, is still feared across the galaxy, thousands of years after the last pureblood drew their breaths. This is a strange kind of immortality. The original Sith are gone, but in every red lightsaber, in every act of dark side ambition, in every lord who kneels before power and calls it freedom, they live on. The story of the Sith species is the story of what happens when a people become an idea. Their biology fades, their culture transformed, but the darkness they carried, that proved to be impossible to kill in the end. If you want us to go deeper, we can cover the Sith Emperor, Ajunta Pao, the 100-Year Darkness War, or the full history of Korriban itself. Just let us know in the comments. If you like the video, if you don't mind dropping a like and maybe a subscription. We will be uploading every day, and until then, stay curious, and as always, may the Force be with you.